Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Juliette Mann.
And I'm Sally Burdett. Our top stories. Bouncing out of recession, the Eurozone smashes first quarter forecast with 4 countries in Europe leading the growth.
China's economy also showing growth for the second straight month, though the rates of growth have slowed.
EU food imports to the UK are set to get more expensive as new post-Brexit border checks come into force today.
With or without a deal, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Rafah incursion will happen even if a ceasefire with Hamas is agreed.
Hong Kong starts trading Asia's first spot Bitcoin funds as it takes on the US in the race to dominate the expanding market.
And back to Earth. Astronauts from China's Shenzhou 17 space mission touched down after 6 months in space. The Eurozone has escaped recession as its economy bounced back and grew faster than expected after almost 18 months of stagflation. Lower energy prices and rising real wages helped boost activity. GDP across the Eurozone grew 0.3%, its fastest rate since 2022, beating estimates. Inflation steadied at 2.4%.
Strong performance by the Eurozone's big 4 economies in particular helped push GDP figures higher. Italy, Spain, France and Germany all posting stronger numbers, Germany attributing its recovery to higher investments and exports.
Let's crunch the numbers now with Mark Oswald, Chief Economist and Global Strategist with ADM Investor Services International. Always good to see you, Mark. Now, that Eurozone GDP up 0.3%. How much can we read into these numbers?
Well, I think one needs to break it down. Yeah. The encouraging part was outside of France, there was a nice pickup and a positive contribution from exports. What is universally true, however, household expenditure in Germany was down, domestic consumption in France was down, domestic demand in Italy was also negative, there was a strong contributions in Germany from construction after a long period of being a real drag on the German economy. So there are encouraging signs in here, but the worrying part is that household consumption, probably still very much beleaguered by the cost of living pressures that there are despite the fall in inflation, are definitely acting as a drag. The offset from the increase in exports is encouraging. I would imagine the bulk of that went to the US because US imports during the quarter were also very, very strong.
So you talk about some green shoots there from construction in particular, but you mentioned those concerns, particularly around the cost of living crisis. Is that the key concern remaining for European economies? What are the headwinds?
Yeah, I mean, I think the headwinds are basically wages are increasing and gradually catching up with inflation. But there is a general feeling that the economy doesn't have that much momentum. So, it's how Q2 looks after this. Is this a one-off after a period of very lackluster performance? Is it really very export dependent? I think that's really the key worry in a world of a lot of geopolitical tensions where export demand might suddenly tail off.
Mark, thank you for all of that. Stay with us because we've got more to quiz you on in just a moment.
Yes, absolutely. China's Politburo says it will step up support for the economy, which saw a slower rate of growth in April after a strong performance the previous month. The top decision-making body says it may use monetary and fiscal policies to boost capital markets and the property sector. It's also announced that the third plenary session of the 20th CPC Central Committee will take place in Beijing in July.
China's manufacturing and services sectors both grew this month, but more slowly than in March. Latest figures show that the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, fell from 50.8 to 50.4. The economy's returned to growth after months of contraction, although there was a brief boost after the pandemic.
All right, let's go back to Mark Ostwald, who is still with us. Hello again, Mark. So manufacturing activity grew slightly more than expected in April. What's behind that growth?
I think it's still the main drivers are very much the tech industry and anything to do with the energy transition. Those are definitely driving things. The loss of momentum is worrying, and particularly the setback in the services PMI down to 51.2 from 53.1. That had been boosted by some post-Lunar New Year activity. It shows that the momentum isn't that strong. And if, in effect, the message from the Politburo today is there needs to be more done. I think more encouragingly on that front, they seem to sound a note where they were saying we're going to need to be even more proactive in shoring up the housing market, sorting out the problems with the bad debts, and also ensuring that new construction gets a bit of a boost. And that, to me, is a positive sign above all because the property sector remains the key drag on the Chinese economy. As I've said many a time before, if one looked at it ex-property sector, which one can't really do, but actually growth hasn't been that bad. But because the property sector has been such a millstone, it's been unimpressive.
So is China out of the woods, or is there still some instability to come in your view?
I think there's instability because of the geopolitical tensions. They're always there as a threat in the background. But I think this note on the whole housing property sector is an important one, because that really does need to be dealt with even more proactively. And it's interest rates aren't going to make a difference to this. It's about the bad debts for the developers, getting those off their balance sheets so that they can actually act in an unencumbered way, and then also putting some ring fencing new construction so that it doesn't become beleaguered by the old bad debts in the property sector. And that is a good way of going about it. It's not unlike the RTC resolution in the US.
All right, thank you very much for chatting to us. That's Mark Ostwald, and he is Chief Economist with ADM Investor Services International.
Microsoft will invest $1.7 billion in artificial intelligence and cloud infrastructure in Indonesia over the next 4 years. The move is part of the American multinational's plans to train 2.5 million people in Southeast Asia in AI use by next year, including nearly 840,000 in Indonesia. The company's chief executive is looking to promote the US company's generative AI technology in the region.
Samsung's operating profits rose by over 900% in the first quarter of this year, beating expectations. The high profits are due to the demand for memory chips used in AI products. The electronics giant suffered record losses last year due to a post-COVID slump across the industry.
The world's largest compressed air energy storage plant has begun operation in East China's Shandong province. It hopes to create a low-cost and clean way to store energy. The plant should be able to power up as many as 300,000 homes, and it's expected to cut carbon emissions by nearly 500,000 tonnes.
The European Commission has launched a disinformation probe into social media giant Meta. The EU is investigating the operator of Facebook and Instagram over concerns the US company is breaching the bloc's online content rules. The Commission claims Meta's efforts to moderate content are insufficient. Probe comes as Brussels attempts to clamp down on disinformation ahead of the EU elections in June.
The chief executive of HSBC has quit after 5 years at the top of Europe's biggest bank for personal reasons. The unexpected move comes as HSBC revealed pre-tax profits in the first quarter were down about 2% on this time last year, with losses on the sale of its Argentine businesses.
New border checks brought in under the UK's Brexit trade agreement come into force today. Meat and dairy products, as well as plants and seeds, are among goods now subject to physical inspection when imported from the European Union. CGTN's Jen Copestag went to meet one specialty grocer in London to see how the changes will affect him.
Got here is a sort of beautiful mixture of how Europe should be. So you've got English asparagus, French white asparagus and Italian artichokes.
Andreas Giorgio has run a high-quality grocery shop in central London for 30 years. His wide range of specialty products come from all over Europe.
Ultimately, our business relies on freight from Europe. Most people aren't aware that the majority of their food throughout the year, up to 80% during winter, 60% during summer, comes via the Channel Tunnel.
In the past, Andreas could order produce from Europe in the morning and have it delivered overnight without checks.
We have this ridiculous situation where they've added phyto certificates to potatoes. You have to have a sanitation check for potatoes.
What happened before?
It just all came through. No checks, no nothing. I could buy something at 7 o'clock in the morning, it would be with me at 7 o'clock in the morning the following day. The delays are caused by companies not having the resources to have staff that are dedicated to doing the paperwork. To do just paperwork for pasta, which should be nice and easy, took 16 pages my end, 8 pages their end.
Goodness.
And customs documents and a customs agent to get them in.
The new checks have been delayed 5 times. The government say that they are essential to prevent serious economic damage to the UK through a potential plant or animal disease outbreak like foot and mouth disease. But some businesses say that these checks have always taken place from the suppliers and add an extra level of unneeded bureaucracy.
My confidence is in the farmers of Europe. I mean, I'll show you a product if you want to come along. So we have this amazing jamon that comes from Spain, courtesy of our good friend Eduardo here. So this guy has created a biosphere for his pigs. They roam around freely, eating acorns. This guy's rescued a breed and made it into an incredible place. Luckily, he has his own sort of vets locally, so he can do the certificates, but many don't. And this is an incredible product. So I would trust him beyond British Customs, to be honest.
Importers will also pay a fee on each type of product that's checked in a shipment, so specialty stores like Andreas's could face a disproportionately heavy burden compared to large supermarkets, who can send trucks with just one product. The government says it's looking at ways to ensure high food safety standards are met. It plans to launch 2 schemes that will allow businesses to carry out checks away from the border. Jen Copestake, CGTN, London.
Marco Forgione is Director General at the Institute of Export and International Trade, and he explained what these checks are going to mean for both businesses and consumers.
The businesses trading from the EU into the UK are now going to face having to submit new documents that they had to do since the beginning of January, and as of today, the potential for their goods, particularly products of animal origin, you highlighted meats and sausages and cheeses and oils and plants, will now also be subject to physical checks. And that there are fees that are going to be liable that they'll have to pay now for those movements. So what we're seeing in the conversations we've had with EU businesses trading into the UK is that because the information from the government has been very late getting to them, that there's been a lot of concern and doubt as to how the system is going to operate, that many of them may actually hold or postpone trading with the UK, and those that do continue will have to pass on to consumers the costs of the transportation.
I wanted to ask you about that, because you talk about these fees and not knowing how things are going to work, but let's talk about how much it's going to cost. You know, what about consumers? How much more is expensive is everything from Europe about to get?
Well, unfortunately, there still remains some doubt about that, because the government hasn't really provided all the information that businesses need in order to assess those costs. However, we've been speaking with one provider in Poland who moves sausages and chickens from Poland into the UK, and they estimate that over the course of the next year it's going to cost them an additional between £1 million and £1.5 million, and those are costs that are going to flow straight down to the consumer. That doesn't include, of course, the potential for disruption and delay. When you're talking about food supply chains, which are highly integrated supply chains and where minutes and hours matter, we could see actually whole loads being lost or spoiled because of delays.
You mentioned that the British government seems to have left crucial details to the very last minute. I mean, it doesn't look good, does it, in terms of what the EU might be thinking of what the UK is doing here?
Well, there are two elements. The first is the changes that the government is making are hugely positive. You know, taking a risk-based approach to managing the border, to being digital first, in the long term are going to pay dividends. The problem is the way it's being implemented. And we've had ongoing conversations both with the UK government and with businesses in the EU. And we have a real fear, actually, that a lot of MSME, micro, small and medium enterprises, particularly in the EU, are just going to think it's too complicated, there's a lack of clarity, there's too much uncertainty, and they will pause or halt their trading into the UK. And that at a time when the NFU, the National Farmers Union, has announced that the UK harvest is going to be a very poor one this year because of the weather. And so we in the UK are going to be even more dependent on imported food.
You're watching CGTN, still to come. Waiting for an answer, Hamas is expected to respond to a new ceasefire proposal after leaving talks in Cairo.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says a Rafah ground operation is imminent, with or without a ceasefire deal with Hamas. His comments come as the Palestinian militant group is due to respond to the latest proposals.
A ceasefire plan could lead to the release of more hostages taken from Israel during the October 7 attacks. Hopes for a deal have grown in recent days following efforts by Egypt and Qatar to revive stalled negotiations.
Let's talk to our correspondent, Sarah Coates, who's in Tel Aviv for us. Good to see you, Sarah. Tell us a little bit more about Prime Minister Netanyahu, what he's been saying today.
Well, Netanyahu continues to vow that we will continue until absolute victory. We will achieve all of our war goals, and that is defeating Hamas. Now, the Israelis are of the belief that the 4 remaining Hamas battalions are stationed down in that southern city of Rafah, where, of course, these 1.3 or so million internally displaced Palestinians are sheltering. But there really is significant political pressure being put on Netanyahu here. On one hand, you've got the far-right flank of his government. This includes the National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and also the Finance Minister, Bezalel Smotrich. They have been threatening that if there is not a full-scale invasion of Rafah and if Israel makes an unacceptable or irresponsible deal with Hamas, then they will walk away from the government. Now, on the other hand, you've got people like War Cabinet member Benny Gantz. He's also the former defence minister. He's been saying that these sort of statements have absolutely no place within government officials, saying that what should be happening first and foremost is that these 133 hostages need to be brought home, and that should be the first priority. We also need to look at what's happening on the Israeli street overnight. There were pretty large-scale demonstrations right here in Tel Aviv, thousands of people turning out. They are demanding that a deal be done now. These people are fed up, they're frustrated, and they are angry. They don't want to see any more military operations. What they want is their loved ones to come home. And they lit a number of fires during last night's protest, saying that Rafah can wait, the hostages cannot.
And of course, Sarah, in Netanyahu's ear is, of course, the United States. Secretary of State Antony Blinken due in Tel Aviv this evening. I believe it's about 7:20 in the evening where you are. So has he landed yet? What can you tell us? What can we expect from the visit?
He hasn't landed yet. He is due here any moment now. When he comes, he'll most likely drive along this promenade here behind me. But he is coming in at an extremely critical time. What we can expect are a number of meetings with senior officials. He certainly will be pushing the Israelis on this plan as to what they're going to do down, in Rafah, and just how they plan on getting these internally displaced Palestinians out, with no plan published yet as to how they intend to do so. Now, of course, this ongoing hostage and ceasefire deal will also be discussed. And we do understand that the Secretary of State Blinken will also be touring Kibbutz Be'eri. That is one of the kibbutzes that was very heavily hit by Hamas down in the south on October 7. It's also a place where many of these hostages were actually taken from and where many others were murdered. And if and when he does actually visit this kibbutz, he would be the highest ranking official to do so yet. So certainly a lot at play here for Antony Blinken. He's got a lot of diplomacy on his plate. So let's see if he can actually do anything to get Israel to actually renege and potentially hold back on this Rafah assault.
Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv, thank you very much for that update.
Well, Hamas is considering its response to Israel's latest ceasefire offer following negotiations in Cairo. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken urged the group to accept what he called an extraordinarily generous deal. From Rafah, CGTN's Akram Al-Satari has this update.
Well, the statements that are coming from Hamas side are mainly coming from Doha or from Cairo, where the Hamas delegation was present and came back to Cairo. They said that they have already received the offer, and they said Hamas is going to give its response in 24 hours maximum. 12 hours have already passed. No statements indicating what or how Hamas is going to give the answer. Hamas has underlined the importance of respecting the four main principles that were dictated by Hamas leadership: full stoppage of the war, full withdrawal of the Israeli army, full and unhindered access of the humanitarian aid, and full and excisable swap deal of the prisoners in return for the Israeli captives. It looks like some of the details are not very accepted by Hamas, especially the one that has to do with the Israeli army staying in some parts of Gaza, which is mainly Netzarim area. And that is perceived by us and by other parts within the Israeli side as an explosive point that would compromise the whole agreement if reached. Some analysts who are close to Hamas are saying that Hamas is not in the position of accepting that deal if that deal does not take into consideration the points that were raised. However, it's a question of 12 days, 12 hours before we know for sure what's going to happen. But at a very personal level, I think there would be no deal, there would be no agreement. And if the requests are not taken into consideration, the ones that were made by Hamas, there would be no agreement.
Meanwhile, on a different front, China has been speaking about the talks it hosted between rival factions, Fatah and Hamas. Give us those details.
Well, Beijing invited the rival factions, Fatah and Hamas, for the sake of just sponsoring and supporting reconciliation talks that was expressed by the Chinese Minister of Foreign Affairs, and who expressed a special interest by China into just getting those rival parties meet and discuss the situation of overall situation and to unite the Palestinians. The Palestinians from their side appreciated that, be that Hamas or Fatah, and they have already met and discussed. There were many meetings before. Those meetings were organized by some other parties, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and even Yemen. But they were not as fruitful. However, the Palestinians are hoping now that China, with its economic and political size globally, would eventually be able to soothe over the critical rifts between the two rivals and help the Palestinians reunite.
We appreciate China's role, but the problem unfortunately lies in the inability of the factions to find a solution. They must find a solution for us after all that we've been through. I believe an alternative body must be found to run the country.
We hope we can return to Gaza soon to live in our cities like the rest of the residents of Palestine. Regarding the news we heard about Fatah and Hamas meetings and the Chinese mediation, we hope that China will succeed in this role and can pave the way for reaching an agreement that will end these difficult circumstances in which we are living.
So the Palestinians are very hopeful that China would reunite the Palestinians. Fatah and Hamas have a very long way to go before they even reach an agreement. The political legacy of Fatah, the political legacy of Hamas, the ideological differences between the two parties are also preventing any agreement. However, this time Palestinians are hopeful that there would be an agreement that would be reached, because the Palestinians at large are under fire, not only in Gaza but also in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. They understand they have no other option but to reconcile, and now they appreciate China for just bringing them together and hope that this meeting and dialogue would end up positively and would help the Palestinians reunite.
Millions of people across Asia are facing sweltering temperatures, forcing schools to close and threatening public health.
In the Philippines, some provinces are seeing temperatures reach dangerous levels, while half of the country experiences drought. Gretchen Malalad reports.
Temperatures across the Philippines have reached extreme danger over the weekend. Last Sunday, the province of Zambales peaked to the highest heat index of 53 degrees Celsius. Heat index is the temperature perceived by the body, which is measured using air temperature and relative humidity. The El Niño weather phenomenon and climate change has exacerbated the dry season, causing temperatures to rise exponentially. The government has ordered schools to shift to online classes because of the unbearable heat. Rose Buendia is helping her 12-year-old daughter study at home. She says it's better for her daughter to stay at home rather than suffer from the heat inside an overcrowded classroom.
There are too many risks for my child when she's outside. It's possible that she can get a heat stroke because of the intense heat. That's the most common.
Parts of Asia and Southeast Asia are also experiencing sweltering heat. In India, which is in the middle of a 6-week general election, millions of voters queued up in scorching temperatures. 2 people were reported to have succumbed to heat stroke in the southern state of Kerala. In Thailand, authorities said that 30 people have been killed by heat stroke so far this year and warned people to avoid outdoor activities. 8 people have died in Bangladesh as temperatures hit a scorching 40 to 42 degrees Celsius. The Philippine government has also logged 6 deaths and more than 30 heat-related illnesses. Task Force El Nino spokesperson Joel Villarama says the deaths are still under verification.
There have been cases of heat stroke, heat stress, and heat-related illnesses recorded by the Philippine Department of Health since January. So far, there have been 34 heat-related illnesses. Some of them have not been recorded because most people do not go to the hospitals to treat heat-related illnesses, so the figure may be higher.
Several fire incidents have ignited in some parts of the city the past weeks due to extreme dry conditions.
The Philippine Weather Bureau has warned that the extreme heat in the country will persist until mid-May. The unusual hot weather has strained power grids and threatened water supplies in cities. Gretchen Malalad, CGTN, Manila.
Argentina's government is hoping for a bumper harvest to boost foreign currency reserves. Last year's mega drought devastated parts of the agricultural sector, and with falling international prices and strike action, the outlook is complicated, as Joel Richard reports from Rosario.
The soybean harvest is underway in Argentina. The success of this year's crop will go a long way in defining the country's economic performance.
As I see, the crop is excellent.
There is renewed optimism amongst producers after last year's historic drought.
I think for Argentine sector will be a good year. We may pay some debts that we have from the past seasons. We are very hopeful for the next seasons.
Yet the outlook for the sector is increasingly complicated.
Argentina was on course to produce its best soybean crop in years. This coming after last year's mega drought wiped billions of dollars off the country's exports. But prolonged periods of rainfall in recent weeks could impact production.
Rainfall is delaying this year's soybean harvest. An insect infestation in the north of the country is damaging corn crops. And some analysts say this could threaten Argentina's economic recovery in the sector.
If you take into account that international prices are lower for soybeans and corn and some of our main products, while the volume increased 50%, the value of our production only increased by 20%.
Agricultural exports are the backbone of Argentina's economy.
Every year, around 75% of our exports come from the agribusiness sector. 2 out of every $3 the country exports come from the fields.
Producers are hopeful that the government of President Javier Milei will come good on the campaign promise to reduce taxes.
We may double the production in Argentina. The whole production, we may double it if we may receive the full price of the products.
Yet in addition to prolonged rainfall and falling international prices, on Monday workers in soy processing plants went on strike over economic reforms that include higher income taxes. This adds further complications to Argentina's agricultural exports and economic outlook. Joel Richards, CGTN, Rosario.
You can get highlights from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN's Storyboard email newsletter. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN. Still to come. Deep fakes pose a serious risk to elections across the globe this year. We find out how tech companies are fighting back. Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Sally Burdett and me, Juliet Mann. The headlines again. Bouncing out of recession, the Eurozone smashes first quarter forecast with 4 countries in Europe leading the growth.
China's economy also showing growth for the second straight month, though the rate of growth has slowed.
And EU food imports to the UK are set to get more expensive as new post-Brexit border checks come into force today.
2 of the world's most recognised names in business are seeing major changes in leadership that could determine the course of their future. Paramount replaces its CEO, Bob Bakish, with a trio of executives as the company weighs in on a possible merger deal with Skydance Media.
Meanwhile, the former chief executive of the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, Binance, is facing the possibility of jail time on charges of violating US money laundering laws.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Jody Jacobs in New York. Hello, Jody. So, big reshuffle at Paramount. What's going down?
Yeah, indeed, and that announcement coming this week by the owners of Paramount Plus, that's the streaming service, the Paramount Pictures movie studio and the TV networks, which include MTV, BET and Showtime. It's just ahead of their reported better-than-expected earnings for the first quarter, Sally. The new trio management team will now include CBS president and the CEO, George Cheeks, Paramount Pictures Studio Chief Brian Robbins, and the head, of course, of Showtime, MTV and BET, Chris McCarthy. Now, insiders say that the executive shakeup appears somewhat ill-timed, with one analyst, of course, even going as far as saying that it looks like a car crash with clear divisions among some of the key stakeholders. All of this, of course, taking place or unfolding as the media giant is in exclusive talks with Sundance, as I just said, with the aim, it says, to build its streaming business as it faces tough competition from Netflix and, of course, as viewership in cable TV declines. But just a quick look at that company's financials. Paramount shares were up nearly 1% in after-hour tradings, and for the first quarter ending in March, it reported adjusted earnings per share of 62 cents, almost double what analysts had predicted, while its revenue came in a few dollars short of Wall Street's prediction, which was at $7.69 billion. Sally, Juliet?
Yeah, well, certainly we've got to watch Paramount. But in other news, the former head of Binance is facing the possibility of a jail term. What's the latest on that?
Well, indeed, and I'm just looking at the reports coming through now. That court case happening in Seattle, it's delayed. The judge there attending to a personal matter, so we're not going to see that unfolding in the next couple of hours or so. But Binance founder and its former CEO, Changpeng Zhao, could face years in prison. He's pleaded guilty to violating U.S. money laundering laws, evading money laundering requirements under the Bank Secrecy Act, to be exact, Sally. This specific charge normally carries about 10 years in prison, but prosecutors in Seattle have told the court that they want to see him serve twice the maximum sentence recommended under federal guidelines. They want a tough sentence for the man who was once considered to be the most powerful person in the crypto industry, saying that this would send out a message, and I quote, "The right choice every time is to comply with the law." Now, Zhao's lawyers, though, have asked for some form of probation, saying that he has shown an unflinching acceptance of responsibility, also having already paid $50 million in a criminal fine. The CEO of Binance, of course, being the second major crypto boss to go to prison, if he is in fact sentenced. That after Sam Bankman-Fried, and we all remember that name. He was sentenced last month to 25 years here in New York for stealing some $8 billion from customers of his company, FTX. And it seems, though, Sally and Juliet, that several cryptocurrency bigwigs are on the U.S. authorities' radar of late. That, of course, following the collapse of crypto prices back in 2022, which exposed fraud and misconduct across that particular industry.
Yeah,
Juliet and Sally.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jodie Jacobs. Always great to chat to you.
I've got another crypto story. Hong Kong has entered the race to try and dominate the growing spot cryptocurrency ETF market. The first spot crypto exchange started trading on Tuesday with Hong Kong units of 3 Chinese asset managers, each launching 2 ETFs, tracking Bitcoin and Ether prices. But it was a lukewarm debut. Let's get more on this. Talk to Naeem Aslam, who's Chief Investment Officer at Zay Capital Markets. Thanks for coming on the programme. Now, this development is a first, but was a long time coming, wasn't it? So what's changed? Why now?
Sure, thanks for having me. Look, I think you've answered your question by using this term, Luke, and that's the really key critical word. Because, you know, if Hong Kong would have done this a year ago, and they had the runway, clear runway to do it before the US would have done it, it would have been a huge deal in the industry, huge, absolutely massive deal. Because then it would be like, yes, Hong Kong has done it. It has a fairly, very good reputation in terms of regulation. It's a great place for companies to flourish, adoptability, custody, and all of that. But doing it now, after the US has already done that, it isn't really a big deal. I think you can see the reaction in the prices today, whether you look at the Bitcoin, whether you look at Ethereum. However, there is still optimism. Optimism in terms of that they have said, okay, you know what, we are actually not only approving the ETF for Bitcoin, we are approving the ETF for Ethereum as well. So, but again, it's not that much of a big deal when it comes to the investment.
What then is the draw of ETFs for investors?
Like, this ETF story was very, very popular. And investors have been waiting for this for over 10 years. This is when, you know, when BlackRock announced it, when they made the first investment in the mining industry, and then investors have been waiting for this one. The whole purpose of this particular ETF is to make it more mainstream. Because for an average investor, buying Bitcoin, buying cryptos is still a little bit tedious method. But investors or traders or an average Joe knows how to go onto a trading platform and how to buy it again. They don't have to worry about custody. They don't have to worry about wallets. They don't have to worry about chains and the keys and anything else. Because once they buy or once they post any part of a share ETF, they have direct exposure. And I think that is the key. So I'm not playing down by any means that this is not a big event. Of course, it's a big event. Yeah. Of course, it's a big event. And of course, Hong Kong is a very important section because Chinese money is going to be involved in everything. And who knows what the future is going to be under new president in the United States. We don't know how investors are going to be reacting from that particular perspective. So for me, where I sit and I look at things, I think, look, another jurisdiction has approved Bitcoin ETF. It has made things a lot less cumbersome for investors who are based in that specific region.
So how do you think other regulators are going to maybe watch and learn from Hong Kong here?
Well, look, you know, sitting over here in London, we look at the FCA very closely, and it will come, and that they are still studying the process. But if you are going to take an example of a regulator, a region of the continent which has done exceptionally well among any other one, because US has completely lost this race, there's no doubt about that, is Dubai, is UAE. That entire region created, attracted companies, attracted adoption, attracted talent. Now, of course, the US approved the ETF, and now still there are concerns among investors and traders, as you were playing the story before, that what can they do because of the lack of regulation. Yes, bad players were involved. They must be punished. They should be punished. Examples should be made. But regulation should be clear for companies to flourish. Just take an example. I don't want to take too much of time, but take an example. Yeah. Go 10 or 15 years ago. Look at the companies, the innovation, the right beginning of innovation of Meta, Google, or any of these particular companies. if these companies weren't given a clear guidance and if they were being penalized, do you think these companies would have exist, or would they have still be present in the United States? No, they would have left. They would have gone to a different jurisdiction where things would be a lot more easier for them to conduct.
Naim Aslam, Chief Investment Officer at Zay Capital Markets. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Judges at the International Court of Justice have ruled against a bid by Nicaragua to stop Germany selling arms to Israel. Nicaragua had appealed to the ICJ, claiming Germany was violating the terms of the 1948 Genocide Convention by supplying weapons to Israel during the Gaza conflict. However, judges voted 15-1 against the application, citing a lack of factual information and legal arguments, but said they remain deeply concerned about conditions in Gaza.
The death toll from floods in Kenya has risen to 171 people as torrential rain continues across much of East Africa. President William Ruto has deployed the military to help people evacuate their homes in the worst affected areas. In one incident, nearly 50 villagers were killed when a makeshift dam in the Rift Valley burst its banks before dawn on Monday. Meteorologists blaming El Niño-based climate change say more extreme rainfall is likely in coming weeks.
Haiti's Transitional Council has elected Edgar Leblanc-Fille as its president. The council has also put forward a candidate for the role of prime minister. It's all part of a plan to return order to the country that's been rocked by violence for months. Gangs who've increased their control are threatening chaos if they aren't granted political powers.
A New York judge overseeing Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial fined the former U.S. president $9,000 for contempt of court. Justice Juan Merchan said he would consider jailing Trump if he continued to violate a gag order. Trump told reporters outside the courtroom the judge is badly conflicted. He's charged with falsifying business records to conceal an $130,000 payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels.
China's Shenzhou 17 space mission has returned to Earth after 6 months in space. The 3 astronauts touched down at the Dongfeng landing site in Inner Mongolia just a few hours ago. They emerged from the return capsule in good condition, according to authorities. The all-male crew is the youngest ever to man a mission to China's space station, with an average age of 38.
They're digitally manipulated images and videos, which can pose a deep threat to public security. Now, artificial intelligence specialists at the Austrian Institute of Technology are developing a new tool to detect so-called deep fakes. Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger met project coordinator Martin Boyer in Vienna.
Only this year, many elections take place all over the world. And by using such images, it's of course a tool to change and to manipulate public opinion. Donald Trump handcuffed in the streets of central New York. You describe in a short way what you want to see, and then artificial intelligence generates this image with the expected content. Opinion is being formed in the second you look at the content.
Roughly 20 minutes of video footage are needed to create a good deepfake. What types of deepfake are out there?
With face swap, there is a video showing a completely different person, but afterwards the face is swapped with the target person. And with face puppetry, you already have a video of the target person, but you change, for instance, lip movements towards what you want the person to say or not.
Who is especially vulnerable?
For instance, think of CEO frauds. Someone in industry trying to, well, get money by faking one's identity. On the other hand, it's also in our private lives. When think of a telephone call, your wife calls you and tells you, hey, I had a car accident, please send me some money.
What's unique about your approach to this problem?
Often fraud is ahead of detection tools. So it's never enough only to rely on detection tools. So our aim is to have, for instance, some web page where you can upload content images, videos, and get indications whether these have been manipulated or not. And at the same time, to approach different target groups, industry, seniors, children, parents, through our project and raise their knowledge level, raise their awareness about these things.
The possible everyday benefits of artificial intelligence are becoming clear to all of us, but it also carries risk. Like all technology, how it's used is as important as what it can do. CGTN spoke to Turing Award winner Dabala Rajagopal Reddy.
The question is, what are the ethical issues? There are certain things where you might want to simply choose not even to join that community. Is biochemical warfare. And there are people that may be working in research labs producing bioweapons, and that is something that the governments have to control. The question is, what is the role of an individual? What is the role of the community, companies, and the government? And that has to be clearly articulated. At this point, we don't have a clear mandate. That is, there's no AI weapons ban convention. There should be. And who does it and how it is done, there has not been any clarity.
Beijing has confirmed President Xi Jinping will hold a tripartite meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron and EU Commission head Ursula von der Leyen during his upcoming visit to Europe.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry says Beijing aims to use the opportunity to improve China-EU relations. President Xi is set to visit France, Serbia and Hungary from May the 5th to the 10th in what will be his first trip to Europe in 5 years.
Now, if you've taken in some of the cultural and natural wonders of the world, chances are you've visited a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
The Pyramids of Giza, the Great Wall and the Acropolis are just some of the historic places afforded protection by the organisation. Ken Brown visited their headquarters in Paris.
Welcome to the UNESCO headquarters in Paris, an organisation on a mission to protect the world's most beautiful, cultural and intangible heritage. UNESCO aims to promote world peace and security through education, arts, sciences and culture. Here, big decisions are made on the nomination and determination of historical landmarks, natural sites and living heritage that could bring protection, investment and sometimes a big boost in tourism. Its heritage program might not have started until 1972, but now close to 1,200 UNESCO World Heritage Sites exist, with UNESCO biosphere reserves in 131 countries, covering 6% of the Earth's surface. From the pyramids in Giza, the Taj Mahal in India, to the Acropolis in Athens and the Palace of Versailles just outside Paris, UNESCO has made its mark. China is second only to Italy on the list, with 57 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Among them are the Great Wall, the Forbidden City and the Terracotta Warriors. There are numerous other sites on UNESCO's tentative list too, like the old tea forests of the Jingmai Mountains, where pu'er tea comes from. A site developed over 1,000 years ago. Or the Quanzhou, a vibrant maritime emporium during the Song and Yuan dynasties from the 10th to 14th centuries. The site includes religious buildings like the 11th century AD Qingjing Mosque, Islamic tombs, pagodas, ancient inscriptions, and an advanced transportation network system. Just a few more of China's many marvels waiting to join the list. Ken Brown, CGTN, Paris.
China's President Xi Jinping will visit France next week, as I'm sure you know by now. Boosting bilateral trade will be high on the agenda. But in Shanghai, residents are already developing a taste for one popular French import, cheese. Our correspondent Cheng Tong reports.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, bienvenue, ni hao.
Wow.
Bienvenue à la crèmerie.
So many types of cheese.
Yes, we have here 30 kind of panel of like what we can find in France.
This is the store in Shanghai city center that only sells French cheese. From the Chinese people's favorite brie to the famous Comté, and even the one which is known as French stinky tofu, the Livrot.
So, this is funky, a bit ammonia. If you are afraid of that, you can avoid with the custard, the skin outside, but you won't feel everything. Me personally, I eat everything.
Yeah, I think it has the smell of the sticky tofu in China.
Yeah.
Let me taste it. Not bad.
Not that strong. There's a bit of bitterness compared to the creamy brie, but if you have no problem with bitterness and if you like chou tofu, it's definitely something you can go for.
The cheese store opened in 2019, the only official flagship store in Asia that is recognized by the French dairy sector. It now takes considerably less time for the French cheese to be shipped from French farms to the Chinese people's dining tables.
It's pretty fast now. If the custom clearance procedure is okay and the shipping goes well, normally from France to China and to Chinese dining table, it's the farthest period is 1 week.
The freshness of the cheese is attracting more and more consumers. In the first quarter of the year, sales at the store jumped by over 18% as compared to the same period last year. The store has been welcoming local residents and French expats.
During winter with fondue, I put with fondue. Yeah, it's kind of your hot pot. And if not, daily with bread and cheese and eggs, like a normal breakfast.
My kids like cheese. I saw on the internet there are many types of cheese here, so I want to try this. I bought some packs to get experience, and I want to learn about cheese.
Bastien told me there are over 1,000 cheese names in France, and here in China we can find only a minor part of it. But as the cooperation between China and France intensifying, I think in the future there will be more cheese choices in China.
France is China's largest agricultural produce importer in the European Union. Not just cheese, China has pledged to import more French agricultural products to the country. During the China International Import Expo last year, China's retailers have also signed deals to bring more French wine, meat, and cheese to China. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
And finally, winning the lottery, it's a dream for many. Think of all the cheese you can buy. Well, that dream has come true for one man, Charlie Saifan, a Laotian immigrant living in the United States. His jackpot, $1.3 billion, the 8th largest in US history. Well, Charlie, who's battling cancer, said he would use some of the money to provide for his family and find a good doctor.
All right, before we go, our top stories once more. The Eurozone has escaped recession, smashing first quarter forecasts, with 4 countries in Europe leading the growth.
EU food imports to the UK are set to get more expensive as new post-Brexit border checks come into force today.
And China's economy has shown growth for the 2nd straight month, though the rate of growth has slowed.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all the team in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.